Welcome to episode 22 of the Wheelhouse. I am Andrew O, and I have been listening to a lot of music this past week. So much that I'm just going to get into the things I've been listening to right now. First thing I listened to, Have You in My Wilderness by Julia Holter. Really good, super intelligent, very intricate. I would say there are a few sort of standout songs, but pretty much everything is sort of entices me to go back and listen because there's just so much depth there. In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel. I was expecting something indie, but not that like lo-fi. Sometimes sounds like he recorded it in the garage, which I would not be surprised if he did. Sounds very crude, but in the best possible ways, both vocally and instrumentally. The Milk-Eyed Mender by Joanna Newsom. Some gorgeous songwriting, some very poetic lyrics, incredible harp playing, and her vocals. I've got to admit, even though she says she takes offense when anyone says this, first thing I thought when I heard her sing was like, sounds like very, very childlike. And I mean, I really want to go back and re-listen to the album to sort of acclimate myself to her vocal style. But you cannot deny, very unforgettable. And even though, you know, there are many vocalists out there who may not have the best singing voice in a conventional sense, but someone like, I don't know, Bob Dylan, like you hear him sing, it's like you can't confuse him with anyone else. But fun fact, she is married to one Andy Samberg of SNL fame, which is okay, that exists. Can't Buy a Thrill, Steely Dan. Good old classic rock with seamless compositions of fluid guitar work and poppy vocals. Looking forward to listening to their next albums. Fear Fun, Father John Misty, his album before I Love You Honey Bear. It's real good. Some really good writing, as always. Though sometimes the rhythms and chorus can seem to follow this sort of similar pattern. Not as good as I Love You Honey Bear, but if you like that album, then I see no reason why you shouldn't go back and listen to Fear Fun. Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, their first album. Before this one, I'd only listened to Paranoid, which I love. And it's not as hard-hitting as Paranoid, but still very powerful. Great long-form compositions with apocalyptic guitar work and haunting vocals. Hot Butter Soul, Isaac Hayes, which might be my favorite album I've listened to of all these so far, and the ones I'm going to talk about after this one. It's phenomenal. Some hardcore soul with a psychedelic flair, and Hayes' super nice bassy voice. It's got an 18-minute song on there, plus a song with the longest song title I've ever seen. I'm going to try not to slip up when I say this, but it's a hyperbolic syllabic sesquidelta mystic. I slipped up a little bit there, but nevertheless, the longest song title I've ever seen. Art Angels by Grimes came out in 2015. A lot of people say it was the best album, either that or To Pimp a Butterfly. And yeah, some high-octane pop with delectable melodies, energetic electronica, and perfect pop vocals. Very much looking forward to diving back and giving that another listen. Their Satanic, Majesty's Request by the Rolling Stones, a band whose best album we're going to be talking about later, on who is Bruce Springsteen. I gotta say, my main impression from this album was that it was a poor man's Sgt. Pepper. I believe it came out in 1967. So that doesn't help that comparison, or I guess it helps, but it kind of hurts them. And the psychedelic aspect doesn't quite gel with the rock. A lot of the times it sort of dominates, and then it becomes a little alienating. But when they do mesh, sounds pretty good. Magic and Lost by Lou Reed. Very stripped down. There's some really smooth, simple guitar work, but some repetitive rhythms, and the lyrics were kind of forced at times, trying to be a little bit too intellectual. I don't think I'm going to say this right, but Trompe le Monde by Pixies. It was okay. All the albums up to that point, I think it's the weakest, but there's still some good songs on there. But yeah, sometimes I go on these really, really heavy music kicks, where generally my typical audio media consumption is podcasts. You know, that's something I listen to pretty much on a daily basis, and then I try to fit in music within that schedule. But sometimes I just go on these binges where I just listen to as many albums as I can, and I'm not going to stop in the foreseeable future until I get sick. Maybe of music or physically sick, and I just or I go deaf. That would be a problem. But I've also been reading. I think I mentioned before I finished Fahrenheit 451, Slaughterhouse 5, and in continuing the trend of books with numbers in their title, I finished reading Catch-22 of the three. It's my favorite. It is probably hands down the funniest book I've ever read. It's so brilliantly written and constructed as far as how it tells a story. It is at times feels very scatterbrained and uneven, but it works to contribute to this overall theme of the absurdity of war. And pretty much every joke is a reworking of that theme, all hinging on the very now famous phrase Catch-22. It is the most masterful blend of comedy and tragedy I've ever seen. There's this phrase, which I like quite a bit, trauma and alarm, or I've noticed a lot of times in stories, to get an effective emotional sort of ending to a story, what you do is spend a lot of time lightheartedly showing characters and their interactions and make it even full comedy, so you come to really like them. And then when tragedy strikes, you're so endeared to them at that point that it really resonates with you. And man, Catch-22 does that in spades. It just feels so good, the writing, and that world just feels so perfectly illogical, and all the characters too fit that world perfectly. The cast of characters, can't forget him. Yazarian, he's the best. Or Yazarian. Trust me, with all the mispronunciations I've had so far, there will be more. I already know, because there's some names that are tough. But yeah, you love all these characters, and then towards the end, when some of them go away, you feel very empty, especially when it does turn very tragic, and the comedy seems to sort of dissipate towards the last few chapters. You feel it, and man, Catch-22 is the bomb. If you haven't read it, go read it right now. The last thing I want to talk about has to do with what I reviewed last week, the album Nexus, original motion picture soundtrack by Solomie. I was kind of mixed on it. Really loved the narrative aspects, but didn't know if the songs could quite stand by themselves and kind of stick with me. But I was in the car and not driving, looked at my phone, and got a notification saying, hey, this guy named Derek Webb liked your tweet about, reviewing the album. I'm like, oh, that name sounds familiar. And then I realized he is actually the mastermind pretty much behind Nexus and Solomie. And right when I found that out, my head started hurting. Not physically. Well, I guess it felt physical, but it was sort of that psychological pain that, yeah, this is a small little podcast I do for fun with friends when I have them. And usually I feel like I have free reign to talk about whatever I want. But this is the first time I realize what I say has repercussions, and it exists in the real world. The internet, no less, and that it will exist forever. And to know that something I did affected someone in reality, I was not expecting that. It sort of was put everything in perspective in a sense. It kind of grinded everything to halt where, hold on, you got to realize everything you're doing isn't in a vacuum. But he was very gracious, and he referred me to a blog post of his sort of explaining the concept behind Solomie, which is one of the things I was confused about. And man, I feel really bad. I feel like I failed in my research, that I didn't, chance upon this, because this is really enlightening. And what's really cool, apparently there's a short story that is the basis of Solomie, in addition to his next album, Control. And they both, revolve around themes of, technology, what it means to be human in a technological world. And apparently these are like companion albums that you're not only supposed to listen to them together, you're actually supposed to listen to Nexus in between the tracks of Control. Like I'm looking here, you listen to the first 7 tracks of Control, then you listen to Nexus, and then the last, 3 tracks of Control. So it is like a one larger piece. And man, I did not know that. And first off, love the concept, love how it's sort of telling 2 stories, a story in each album with its own character, but they are part of a larger narrative based off of this short story. And man, definitely going to check out Control. And I'm really fascinated about this whole implanting an album inside another album and giving it a whole nother meaning. That is pretty awesome. So I love the concept. And now knowing that there is no like film or visual aspect or component of Nexus at all, definitely going to look at it at a different light. But yeah, I felt really bad because, I was kind of mixed on the album. And I know he listened to it. So I'm like, ugh. Now I feel like everything I'm going to say now, there's a small possibility that whoever made whatever I'm talking about is going to listen to it and hate me forever. But Derek Webb does not seem like he's going to hate me forever. Hopefully not. But if you're a first-time listener, you may be thinking, man, when is this guy going to explain what's going on, what this show is about? If he doesn't explain anytime soon, I'm going to hate him forever. Well, I'm going to explain now, so hold your hate. You shouldn't hate people you barely know. But regardless, I'll explain to you what the show's about. Every week, there is a principal media, such as a book, or movie, or a game, or an album. And this is recommended. This past summer, it's been by guests who have recommended things, and then I go that week, experience it, come back, and then review it. And last week, David Arias recommended a film, which I'm going to be reviewing right now. It is High Fidelity, a film that came out in the year 2000, directed by Stephen Frears. It's about Rob, played by John Cusack, who is the owner of a record store. And in the film, he sort of recounts his top 5 breakups as he's in the midst of another failing relationship. And in addition, there is one point where he actually goes out and meets the top 5 ex-girlfriends and tries to see like, oh, why did this relationship not work out? How can I learn from that and sort of apply it to my current relationship? So, High Fidelity got a lot of style, and it's very impressive and sort of even irresistible in the first half. But there are sort of problems that start to reveal themselves as the charm wears off toward the final act. But we'll get to the final act. First off, about High Fidelity, what you gotta talk about is the music. And it's really at the heart of High Fidelity and one of the best aspects of the film. Music is on one side, the literal language for Rob and his 2 co-workers at his record store. You have Dick and Barry, played by Todd Luizzo and Jack Black, respectively. But it's also, a more conceptual language for the film itself. On a base level, you have, 3 guys in the record store, and they have 3 different personalities, and those are sort of reflected in their sort of preference for music. Rob is sort of a jack of all trades. Todd is a little more quiet or thoughtful. First, band he plays at the record store is Belle and Sebastian. And Barry is a lot more loud, energetic, and the music he enjoys reflects that as well. But there's also some thematic relevance in the movie. The first song you hear when the movie starts, You're Gonna Miss Me by the 13th Floor Elevators. Just by the little log line I gave you, you can see how that fits. And the soundtracks serve as illusions that not only provide fuel to the film's pacing, but also meaning to the scenes. They're extra context that if you sort of know a little bit about the song, it adds a little more nuance or dimension to the scene. For example, when Rob is detailing a relationship he had in high school, you got Crocodile Rock by my favorite, Elton John, playing. And that song is just about, being young and hip. Remember when rock was young, and it fits perfectly with that high school aesthetic. And then you have at one point the song The River by Bruce Springsteen, and you have a line there, I didn't check this up verbatim, but it goes something like, I got Mary pregnant. And I think that song actually might be played before it's revealed that Rob's current girlfriend, Laura, at one time got pregnant. So again, it's like these sort of hints that not only build the film world, but also imbues it with this subtext. And by the way, that cameo by Bruce, pretty amazing. Which also reminds me, spoilers, sorry I didn't say that earlier. Luckily I didn't get into anything super spoilery, but there will be when I talk about the end. Still talking about music though, but on a more technical level. The music sort of weaves itself in and out of the diegetic film world pretty seamlessly. Again, beginning, perfect example. You see, a vinyl record spinning, and you hear the first song, and it's like studio album quality, but the quality of the sound degrades as the camera approaches Rob, who is listening to it on headphones himself. And the film does that pretty much all the time, and it works perfectly. And all around, just it's an oral feast. I've been really into music these last few years, and just hearing all these different songs, and also just in the record store, all the different album covers everywhere. It's just fun to pick things out. But definitely the next most notable stylistic choice of High Fidelity is the use of narration and breaking the fourth wall. Right off the bat, you have John Cusack's character speaks to the audience, detailing his past and present, relationship woes, and it's got Annie Hall's DNA all up in this movie's blood, and it mostly works. It has a consistent comedic tone and really establishes Rob's personality, but I think John Cusack is miscast. Never thought he convincingly pulled off the fourth wall narration, like Woody Allen in Annie Hall. The diegetic scenes where it's just Rob interacting with the other characters in the record store with his ex-girlfriends or whatnot. He felt fine in those, but whenever he was narrating or talking into the camera, it felt very written and predetermined. When it really should be sort of authentic and personal. And I'd like to give more detail, and I feel like I can't, and I really hate to say it, but he lacks that, je ne sais quoi to pull it off. It just might be how he looks. Might just not have the, idiosyncrasies. So it goes. And Rob comes off as pathetically mopey at times because of, these sort of narrations, and they sort of revolve around the same theme. He's eternally pessimistic to the point where I really questioned, what good qualities he had. And I was wondering, what all these, women actually saw in him. Because you don't really see that. You see him whenever he's at his worst, in prior breakups and this current one. So I wanted a little more development there. But speaking of casting, some more comments. Rob's most recent girlfriend, Laura, played by, this is one of the names I said I'm not going to get right at all. Iben Hiyele, Iben, and his last name, take a look at this, Hjejle. Yeah. But despite me not being able to pronounce her name, she is great acting. Very honest and very effective. Jack Black pretty much plays Jack Black in the film, which is, in my opinion, a double-edged sword. Because he is such a boisterous and lively character, but at times I couldn't take it. I saw him as Jack Black the whole time, which any time that happens, when you don't see the actor playing the character, you just see the actor. It kind of pulls you out at times. In the baffling casting decision, Tim Robbins as Ian, the pseudo-spiritual neighbor who steals Laura away for a time. And man, really can't get Shawshank out of my head watching Tim Robbins. Sorry, it just doesn't work. And Joan Cusack, who I believe is John Cusack's sibling, is excellent. Very vibrant, emotive, and plays off other characters wonderfully. She probably might be one of my favorite supporting characters. But time to move on to more technical stuff about High Fidelity. And man, my biggest note technically is it could be pretty amateur at times. The lighting and color is kind of flat. Kind of was reminiscent of something like Train Spotting. And I don't know if that's some like Channel 4 British style, but here I definitely wanted to be a little bit more vibrant, to sort of match how layered, the soundtrack was. But didn't really get that. And also, oddly, there is some obvious shadows in Rob's apartment. that you can tell, like, oh, well, the only reason that shadow would be there, there's like a light placed right behind the camera, and I don't know, just really the fact that it stuck out is a problem. Also, there's some painfully apparent ADR, especially in this one scene where it's Rob and Laura in the rain, and yeah, getting sound in the rain is really tough. But I could tell, like, yep, they looped this in the studio after the fact. And all these things can kind of make the film feel almost documentary style at times, but other times it was pretty chintzy. But now we get to the final act of the film, which is the most problematic aspect of High Fidelity. It's contrived, disjointed, and abrupt. Again, spoilers, but what kicks it off is Laura's dad dies. There's a funeral. But then later that day, she says she wants to get back with Rob. And I was just thinking, well, that's convenient. The death of a loved one is what it takes to sort of accept that your boyfriend cheated on you while you're pregnant, causing you to get an abortion. There was no, the whole time we see, Rob and Laura, beginning, she leaves, right, takes all her stuff from the apartment, and we see them trying to, Rob mostly is ones to try to find out not only why she left, but if it's even possible to get back together again. And there are some very small steps taken to sort of reconcile their relationship, but nowhere near did it build to the point where by the time they got to the funeral, she could logically say, like, okay, I think I'm ready to get back together again. Maybe the only reason, maybe the justification was that it was such a monumental event that maybe she needed to fall back and rely on Rob again, but felt forced. Nonetheless, they're back together again. Fantastic. But the climax comes out of nowhere and is very unsubstantial. The climax concerns this concert at the record store with an up-and-coming punk duo. Rob's going to DJ again, which he used to do, but stopped. And then Barry is going to perform with the band. And again, there's no progression to that point. And a bigger problem is that there are no stakes. It's like, well, because it felt like this just sort of came out of nowhere, why should I be invested in this? Why should I care? So when that climax resolves, I was thinking, well, that's it? Like, that's how you're going to decide to end the movie? Felt very rushed, which is disappointing because of how sort of fun and entertaining the first half is. And I can go on with some character issues like dropped subplots, logical inconsistencies, but at this point I think it's a little excessive. High Fidelity, enjoyable up to the last act, then becomes very tired. It's a little bit more style than substance, but I mean, I am a sucker for the use of music, but can't say I loved it, which breaks my heart. Really wanted to, couldn't. But how can you mend a broken heart? Oh, maybe about talking about some awesome music. I'm here once again with Jacob Estrada for another edition of Who is Bruce Springsteen? What is that? Is that a phone? Is that a phone noise?
Yeah, sorry. My phone just received the text you sent me that said ready.
Well, I guess you're not, because your phone's not on silent. But you will be.
Yeah.
All right. How are you doing, Jacob?
Wait, hold on.
Oh.
Doing pretty good.
You doing good after listening to this album we're going to talk about?
Yeah, it was interesting, the experience. I mean, I definitely look forward to talking about it.
Yes. Well, you don't have to look that forward because we're talking about it right now. We are talking about Exile on Main Street, the 10th album by the Rolling Stones. So, prior to listening to this album, what did you know about the Rolling Stones, like them as an entity, and also maybe some of their songs?
Well, I knew they were British. I didn't know that many of their songs, but I knew a few of them. I knew like Ruby Tuesday and Let's Spend the Night Together and like Is on My Side and a few other songs like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew them from like the depiction of them in that James Brown movie, because that movie, like one of the producers on that movie was Mick Jagger, and like he was in a bunch of interviews about like what he thought of James Brown and how he influenced some of the work he did or whatever. So that aside from that and the few songs about them I know, and then some other songs seem a little bit Beatles-esque. Aside from that, I don't know that much.
What do you know about Mick Jagger? Anything else besides that James Brown movie? Like
Not
any
really.
like
No.
any idea that you attach to him, like in the cultural realm of all culture?
I remember. Yeah, only thing I can attach to him is that he was apparently known for like really weird dance moves or something. Because I remember our older brother made some comments about the Rolling Stones once, and then Mick Jagger brought it up in that interview about James Brown, where he said he tried to imitate James Brown dance moves, but he couldn't do them correctly, and so he ended up with like something completely different.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
They are very unique, but we're not talking about Mick Jagger's dancing. We're talking about Exile on Main Street, which is generally considered the Rolling Stones' best album. You listened to it. I've re-listened to it. What did you think?
I liked it. It was definitely a bit of a different experience than some of the other songs. I can't say that I liked it as much as I liked the Led Zeppelin album last week, but I definitely have some positive things to say. And one of the first things I want to say is the first time I listened to the songs, when I was just driving in my car, I didn't take to them as much, or they didn't really leave any impact on me, partly because of like the style of singing and the genre. I had a hard time honestly making out the words to the lyrics. Which to me is like, so because it's harder for me to talk about like the actual music, lyrics are really important to me. So the first time I listened to through it, I wasn't crazy about it, but then I was like, okay, this isn't working. So I just went online and I played the whole album again, but as the songs played, I like actually looked at the lyric sheet so I could now make out what they were saying.
Yeah.
And once I did that, once I had that in place and I had context and I actually knew what they were trying to say, I took to it a lot more.
Yeah, and it is a double album, so there's a lot of music there. So
Yeah.
sort of.
Yeah.
I think one of some of my first listening to it, one of the problems I had was that there were like it was a lot of music, and at times I felt like some of the songs they didn't stand out as much. But yeah, going and listen to it a second time, I did have a slightly different experience. But you can continue with your analysis.
Thank you. Yes, my analysis, finger quotes. Well, right off the bat, I do. I'll say I loved Rocks Off and Rip This Joint. I really love Torn and Frayed. Those are among my favorites on the album. One song I was not as crazy about was Casino Boogie. I was not a fan of Casino Boogie. Now, in preparation for this podcast, I went on Wikipedia and looked at like the individual pages for each song. Some of them, talk about the songs were about. Some of them didn't have much to say. But the page for Casino Boogie, there's a quote from, I think it was a quote directly from Mick Jagger, it might have been one of the other band members, but it said, at 12 o'clock, the song didn't exist at all. At 4 o'clock, we had recorded it. So they basically wrote it and recorded it in an afternoon.
Yeah, that actually might be about the song Happy, the Keith Richards song. I think that quote,
that is about Happy.
Yeah, it might be for that one because I'll get into this later, but the recording was really like pretty scattered for Exile. And one time Keith Richards...
Here's the one for...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, here's the one for Casino Boogie, which was actually a similar experience where it wasn't written in an afternoon, but for the lyrics, Jagger apparently wrote... I'm reading this directly from the page now. Jagger apparently wrote random phrases on torn pieces of paper, and he had the band members pick them out at random, and whatever order they pulled them out is what created the lyrics. So that one was also pretty random.
Yeah, I think they also mentioned how they're influenced by William S. Burroughs, the writer, and so that's also a similar style there. But yeah, I like that song. So I know, but for you, where the lyrics, you resonate with the lyrics the most, and I can see that. But musically, I think that song is very strong. But any other notes do you have?
Well, I was gonna go on to say that it's really interesting. It's been really interesting watching like the different or like learning about the different processes and like different like places the different artists I've listened to go through to write their songs. Like, a few weeks ago I listened to Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," and that's like a really heartfelt, meaningful, powerful album about all these political issues. And then that he like just torn to pieces over emotionally. And then I read this about Casino Boogie, and we just pulled random phrases out of a hat. Or I read this page about Happy, and it's like, yeah, we just wrote this in an afternoon. Not that that's a criticism, but it's really interesting to watch the different creative processes going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And even within the same album, like you have Happy, which was written in an afternoon, but in that same album you have let's see, which one's it called? I think it's like Sweet Black Angel.
Yeah.
Is that the name? Yeah.
Well, that is the name of a song.
Is actually, yeah, that one is actually an outright political message about like racism and discrimination and stuff like that. And so it's like even within the same album, there's just like there's a wide range of not only different kinds of songs, but different kinds of genres.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really interesting to think about.
Any other final notes you have?
Overall,
anything? Yeah.
Positive. Overall, it was a positive experience. I like the album. I'm not crazy about every song on the list, but I do think I'll be checking out more Rolling Stones.
Yeah, it's hard for a double album to love every song. The one comparison I could think of right off the bat is with Stevie Wonder. His 1973 album Inner Visions, I think it's like 9 songs. Yeah, it's 9 songs, and I think they're immaculately constructed. Each one's like perfection. And then 1976, you have Songs in the Key of Life, which I would argue argue might not be the right word, but I think that they're more like recognizable, hits from that album. But it's a double album, and there's a lot of songs on there, and one of the reasons I like Inner Visions more is because with Songs in the Key of Life, there are some flat out phenomenal songs on there, but of an album that length, it can't stay phenomenal the whole time. There are some songs where you go, okay, they're good, but not as good, And I think with Exile Main Street too, like, yeah, I would say all these songs that here are good, but definitely some are better than others, and some obviously will resonate with certain people more than others, like you've said yourself. But we've alluded to some of the history of how this album came together, and I can give a more detailed history. Exile Main Street,
please do.
Released on May 12th, 1972. Rolling Stones, their 10th album. And you could say that the band was in an exile of sorts at the time because some of the problems that the band was facing. They had recently gotten out of their contract with Alan Klein at ABKCO, and they had formed their own label, Rolling Stones Records, so that was sort of a fledgling company that they had to deal with. They were also facing a lot of pressure in Britain. One, the police on their back for all that drug use, and also for the oppressive tax code, which gave them a lot of problems. So they decided, the band, to relocate to France, specifically to a little villa called Nelcote, where they started recording Exile on Main Street. But there were still a lot of problems, a lot of group infighting, in particular over one issue, mainly substance abuse, especially with guitarist Keith Richards, loving that heroin. I don't know if love is the right word, but he was addicted. And because of all these things, production was very scattered. A lot of problems with people not showing up, juggling between a lot of different personnel and musicians. But despite all this, they did record some tracks, and some of these tracks were taken later to Sunset Sound Recorders in Los Angeles, where they recorded overdubs and also recorded some new tracks for the album. They had aid from keyboardist Billy Preston and Dr. John, which helped give the album, imbue it with a little bit more of that experimental genre aspect, like gospel and stuff like that. And the work that the Rolling Stones did at both locations yielded eventually the full double album, which is a sweeping work containing a blend of classic Rolling Stones blues rocks in songs like Rocks Off and All Down the Line, and more experimental country and gospel influences. You also have Keith Richards, his best guitar work, Mick Jagger's versatile vocals, and one of my favorite aspects of Exile Main Street is Nicky Hopkins, who was the pianist. And I love all the piano in this album. It sort of grounds all the songs in a genre, like this is blues or rock or honky tonk or gospel. And sort of the style of the piano really lays a great foundation for all the other musical elements. But one other thing I noted when re-listening to this was, for a long time I had held that my favorite Rolling Stones album was their previous album, Sticky Fingers, released a year before. But going back and re-listening to Exile, that might have changed. And I think I need to go back and re-listen to Sticky Fingers. I think it is because of the issue I have talked about, is how, Sticky Fingers is not a double album. It has, 10 songs, and it's a lot more digestible, and go like, man, I really love all these songs. Whereas Exile, listening to it first time, there's a lot more to take in. But having gone back, I appreciate it much, much more. And it is pretty amazing. Jacob, any final thoughts on Exile? Or have you said all you've wanted to say?
No, I'm good. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. Next, you may have picked up that earlier in this segment, I misspoke. I said Keith Rogers instead of Keith Richards. And one reason that may be is because this next album we're talking about, one of the musicians, his name's Roger Waters, who is a member of the band Pink Floyd. Because next week we're going to be talking about The Dark Side of the Moon, which you know about, correct?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I know of it. I do not know the songs on that album.
It's the 8th album by Pink Floyd, released March 1st, 1973, which is my favorite year in music, 1973. I still believe 1971 is the best year, but my favorite is in 73. Dark Side of the Moon, the quintessential progressive rock album with one of the most recognizable album covers of all time, which you know.
Yeah.
It's 43 minutes of near constant music, with almost every song flowing into the next. As it is, I guess, falling under the umbrella of concept album. It's a showcase of advanced production techniques and philosophical themes, and it is an essential album. Jacob, I implore you, for this album in particular, out of all the albums that we have talked about and will talk about, listen to Dark Side of the Moon in a single sitting, because that's the best way to experience it. Because, like I mentioned before, how a lot of the songs blend into one another. It really is like one giant 43-minute masterpiece. So, yeah. Get an hour, block it off, sit down, and just listen to it all the way through.
I will do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely think it's the best way to go about Dark Side. So, I think that's it. Jacob, as we've done the last couple weeks, any pun or witticism to end this segment? You say it right now, or I'm going to hang up on you.
So how many people actually listen to this podcast?
All right, bye. So, we have another recommended album for Who is Bruce Springsteen, and now I have to play a recommendation for next week, This comes in from one Quinn Brightfella, and I believe this will be the first true TV show that I'm going to be talking about, which you'll hear the recommendation right now. Mics are hot. Super hot.
Damn. Hot.
All right, I'm here with Quinn. How are you?
Hey, I'm
First
good.
question. How do you say your last name?
Bright feller.
Okay.
Like, a light is bright, and then feller.
As in, hey, look at that fella over there.
Yeah, that feller over there. He's so bright. Yo.
You can never forget it. All right. What are you recommending?
I am recommending an American TV comedy drama television
Great. I only watch American shows.
Okay, that's good. Good good for you. Locally grown. Called Louie, which is based on the comedy of Louis C.K. Started in 2010, and it's a great show that combines comedy and real life values and morals, and it's just relatable.
Mm-hmm. So I know a little bit about the show. Like there's
Mhm.
parts where he does straight up stand up, and then there's some moments where he
Yeah, kind of like blends those two together.
and he stars in it, and I assume he also writes it.
Yeah, I think he has a few extra writers, but
Yeah.
he does a good amount of the writing.
Okay. And the show's still going on right now.
Mhm,
And
yeah.
I guess it's doing well because it's still going.
Yeah, no, it's doing very well.
When did you first watch Louis? Did you watch it when it first came out?
It was during season 1. I
Okay.
don't remember the premiere, but it was around that time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And why you're recommending this show out of all the other shows that exist in the world?
It's one of my favorites because it just blends a lot of things together in ways that others don't. You know, not all comedies, have kind of more emotional moments. There's a lot of story about Louis' growth, and it gets serious for a lot of moments, and there's like absolutely no comedy. It's dry.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a really good job of mixing between just stupid comedy and really deep and emotional, vibrant moments.
Cool. Well, I've heard a lot of good things,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Cool.
Right.
Definitely.
Thank you.
No problem.
Looking forward to Louis. Not like Louis C.K.'s comedy, so should go well. And now, we have come to the end of the Wheelhouse. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry. I apologize. If you just cry for a week straight when you rub the tears from your eyes and go onto the internet, you'll see there'll be another episode, so cry away. Unless you do one of the following, then you can stop crying. You could go to Facebook, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/wheelhousecast. Follow us on Twitter at wheelhousecast. Subscribe to our feed on iTunes, where you can also rate and review us. And finally, if you want to send in anything at all, fan mail, hate mail, you could do so at wheelhousecast@gmail.com. I'm Andrew, and go tell some friends about the show. That'd be a kind of cool thing for you to do. If you have no friends, go make friends first. If you don't know how to make friends, then I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.